The desert wind carried a strange sound that night, half whisper, half warning. It slid over the sand like a secret, curling through the rocks and into the valley where the Apache camp lay silent under the moonlight. The stars were sharp and cold, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called, its cry breaking the quiet like a crack in glass. The warriors had returned from a long hunt earlier that day, their horses still restless, their faces marked with exhaustion. But even as the fire burned low, one man sat apart from the others, staring into the shadows. He was known for his silence. Strength in the stories whispered about him among the tribe. A warrior whose loyalty to his people ran deeper than blood. He had never broken a rule, never hesitated in duty, and never questioned the path laid before him. Until that night, when a voice rose from the darkness, weak, trembling, and utterly human. Double quotes. Please. I beg you, let me go. The words froze him where he stood. His hand tightened on the knife at his belt, his breath catching in the cold air. The sound had come from near the river, faint but real. He turned his head, scanning the shadows between the stones. The rest of the camp slept, unaware. Only the wind moved, but that voice, it had carried something different, something desperate. He rose slowly, the muscles in his shoulders tense beneath the deerskin. The moonlight spilled across his face, showing eyes dark and unreadable, yet softened by something he couldn't explain. He followed the sound, careful not to wake the others. The desert was a dangerous place after nightfall, not because of beasts, but because of spirits. The elders said the souls of the restless wandered here, luring men to their doom. But this voice didn't sound like a spirit. It sounded alive. As he neared the riverbed, he saw her, a figure crouched near the rocks, her wrists bound, her face pale under the silver light. She looked frightened, half hidden by the reeds. Her dress was torn, her hair tangled with dust and leaves, but her eyes, they met his with a strength that startled him. She was not from his people, that much was clear. Her skin was lighter, her clothes unfamiliar. She must have been taken during one of the raids, another captive meant for exchange or punishment. Yet there was something different about her presence, something that made the night feel heavier. When she saw him, she flinched, then whispered again, "Please, don't tell them I'm awake." He didn't move at first. His breath came slow, his heart unsteady. The rules were clear. No one interfered with captives. They were the tribe's responsibility, not his. But something in her voice caught him. It wasn't only fear. It was pain, deep, aching pain that pulled at something inside him he hadn't felt in years. "Who are you?" he asked quietly, his voice low enough not to travel beyond the river. Her lips trembled. "Someone who shouldn't be here." He could see tears glinting in her eyes, though she tried to hide them. Her body shook as she tried to sit straighter. "Please, if you have any mercy, help me." He should have turned away. The Apache way was built on strength, on survival. Mercy was a dangerous thing. It made warriors weak. Yet standing there, he felt the old code pressing against his chest like a weight. He thought of the chief's words, no hesitation, no compassion, no betrayal. But he also thought of the stories his mother used to tell him before she died, about how the earth itself had a heart, how every life was part of the same breath. He glanced back toward the camp. The fires were low, shadows moving gently. No one would know if he spoke to her. No one would see if he loosened the ropes just a little. But once he took that step, there would be no turning back. Her voice broke the silence again. "They'll kill me at sunrise." His eyes met hers. For a moment, neither spoke. The moonlight flickered across the water, and something in that quiet exchange shifted. He wasn't looking at an enemy anymore. He was looking at a person broken, frightened, but alive. He moved closer, slow and cautious. The girl tensed, expecting the worst. But he only crouched near her and touched the rope binding her wrists. The knot was tight, harsh against her skin. He hesitated, then began to work at it with his knife, his fingers steady, but his mind in turmoil. "You don't know what you're doing," she whispered. "If they see you, I know," he said. "Be quiet." The ropes fell loose. She rubbed her wrists, staring at him in disbelief. He stood, scanning the shadows again. His instinct screamed to stop, to walk away before it was too late, but his heart refused to listen. She tried to stand, her legs weak from being tied too long. He caught her before she fell. For a second, their hands touched, and in that touch, everything changed. He saw fear in her eyes, but also something else. Trust. It was fragile, trembling, but it was there. And it was enough to make him forget the rules, the code, the danger. "You must go," he said, almost under his breath. "Now, before anyone wakes." She stared at him, uncertain. "Why are you helping me?" He didn't have an answer. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was something deeper, something he didn't dare name. All he knew was that he couldn't watch another innocent person die. "Not again." "Go," he said again, more firmly. She took a shaky step back, still looking at him as if she didn't quite believe what was happening. Her lips parted like she wanted to say something, but then she stopped. There was no time. He pointed toward the edge of the valley where the dark hills rose like shadows. "Follow the river until you reach the trees. Keep low." She nodded slowly. "Will you? Be all right?" He almost smiled. "I'll worry about that later." She hesitated one last time before she turned and disappeared into the night, her figure swallowed by the silver darkness. The wind rose again, carrying the sound of her footsteps away. For a long moment he stood there, staring at the place she had been, his pulse thudding in his ears. He should have felt relief. Instead, he felt the hollow ache of something lost behind him. Twig snapped. He turned sharply, knife raised, his heart leaping. A shadow moved among the rocks. Then came a low voice, one he recognized instantly. "What have you done?" It was his brother, another warrior, eyes burning like coals in the dim light. He stepped forward, gaze flicking toward the loosened ropes on the ground. The air between them tightened. Neither spoke for several seconds, the silence stretching heavy and dangerous. The warrior's throat felt dry. "You saw nothing," he said quietly. But his brother's jaw clenched. She was the chief's captive. "You've broken law." The words hit like a blade. He could feel the weight of them sinking deep. There would be consequences, exile, shame, perhaps even death. Yet when he thought of her face, the way her voice had cracked when she pleaded, he couldn't regret it. "I did what was right," he said. His voice low but steady. His brother stared at him, torn between loyalty and duty. The silence stretched again, filled only by the rustle of the wind. Finally, the younger man turned away. "Then may the spirits decide your fate," he murmured, and vanished into the dark. The warrior stood alone by the river, his heart pounding. He looked once more toward the horizon where the girl had gone. The night felt heavier now, every star seeming to watch in judgment. He had broken tradition, something no Apache warrior dared to do. He knew that by sunrise, the camp would know. He would be hunted, questioned, maybe killed. But deep down, beneath the fear and the weight of what he had done, there was something else. A quiet sense of purpose. He had saved a life. And somewhere out there in the desert, that life was running free. The wind rose once more, carrying her voice faintly through the darkness, or maybe it was only his memory. Either way, it followed him long after the night had ended, whispering the same words that had started it all. Double quotes. "Please. I beg you, let me go." And though she was gone, he knew her plea would change everything for both of them. The first rays of dawn crept over the horizon, painting the desert in pale gold. The Apache camp was beginning to stir, the faint sound of voices breaking the stillness. Horses shifted restlessly, and the smell of smoke drifted from the rekindled fires. But one man did not move from where he sat near the river, his knife resting against the ground beside him. He hadn't slept. His eyes were fixed on the empty trail where she had disappeared hours ago. Each moment that passed made the danger more real. He could already hear the chief's voice in his head, sharp, cold, questioning. The girl was gone. The ropes were found cut. Someone had helped her escape, and soon enough, all signs would point toward him. He knew the punishment that awaited anyone who betrayed the tribe's laws. But what haunted him wasn't fear of death. It was the thought of her alone, frightened. Somewhere in the endless stretch of sand and stone, he rose when the camp fully woke, moving with a calm that didn't match the storm inside him. He helped feed the horses, nodded to the other men, and tried to keep his expression steady. His brother's gaze followed him from across the fire, dark and uncertain. No words were spoken, but the silence between them said everything. By mid-morning, the search began. The chief ordered every warrior to sweep the valley. Tracks had been found near the river, one set of footprints too small to belong to any warrior. The men spoke in low tones, anger simmering beneath their breath. A captive escaping was more than a loss. It was an insult. It meant weakness. Someone had failed to keep watch, and that failure would demand a price. The warrior joined the search, his heartbeat steady but cold. He knew how to hide his tracks. He had been taught since childhood. But he also knew others were just as skilled. If they looked too closely, they might see the truth. Every broken twig, every misplaced stone could betray him. He moved silently, eyes scanning the ground, mind racing. As he walked, memories began to surface, not of her face, but of his mother's. She had been taken by fever years ago, leaving behind only her words. "The earth remembers kindness," she used to say, "even when men forget." He hadn't understood it then. But now, watching the tracks fade into the dust, he began to see what she meant. He thought of the girl's trembling hands, the way her voice cracked when she asked for mercy. She had not been a threat. She had been someone's daughter, someone's family. To kill her would have been simple, but to let her live felt like the truer strength. And yet, that choice now placed him on the edge of ruin. By afternoon, the chief called everyone back. No trace of her had been found beyond the hills. The men stood in a circle, the sun burning above them. The chief's expression was hard, unreadable. His voice carried across the dry air, like the rumble of distant thunder. She was weak, and she was our prisoner. She did not escape alone. Silence followed. No one moved. The chief's eyes traveled slowly around the group, resting on each man as if weighing his soul. When his gaze landed on the warrior, it lingered a heartbeat too long. "You were seen near the river," the chief said. The words hung heavy in the air. The warrior met his gaze, calm but firm. "I went to drink. I heard nothing. Saw nothing." A murmur ran through the crowd. His brother shifted, jaw tight, but said nothing. The chief studied him for another moment, then turned away. "We will find her," he said. "If anyone helped her, they will face the spirits with no honor." The meeting broke. The men scattered, anger simmering in their movements. The warrior stayed where he was, the dust swirling around his boots. He could feel eyes on him, suspicion, curiosity, maybe even respect. Among his people, defiance carried a strange kind of power even when unspoken. That night, he went to the edge of camp again. The moon was thin, the sky wide and silent. He stared into the desert, wondering if she had made it past the ridge. He imagined her walking alone, searching for water, her feet blistered, her throat dry. He had given her a chance, but a chance was no guarantee. The desert was unforgiving, especially for those who didn't know its ways. He thought of going after her, following her trail quietly and making sure she survived. But every step away from camp would tighten the noose around his own neck. He had to choose between his tribe and his conscience, between the life he knew and the one he might have to face alone. Behind him, soft footsteps approached. He didn't turn. He already knew who it was. "You should not come here," he said quietly. His brother stood beside him, arms crossed. "You think I haven't already seen enough? They'll know soon." "You can't hide this forever, I know, then." "Why?" The warrior looked toward the horizon. "Because she was innocent." His brother exhaled, frustration twisting his features. "Innocence doesn't matter. The law does. You've brought danger to all of us, maybe," he said. "But I couldn't let her die." For a moment, the only sound was the wind brushing the dry grass. Then his brother spoke again, voice low and uneasy. "If they find her, they'll bring her back here, and they'll know it was you. You should leave before that happens. He didn't answer. The idea of leaving the tribe, his home, his blood, felt like tearing something vital from his soul. But staying meant waiting for judgment. The next morning, he packed what little he owned, his knife, a water pouch, and a small piece of his mother's woven cloth. He didn't tell anyone goodbye. The camp was quiet as he mounted his horse and rode toward the open desert. The sun climbed higher, burning across the sand. He followed the river's path, searching for signs, footprints, broken reeds, a scrap of cloth. Hours passed before he found what he was looking for, a faint trail leading toward the canyon. His chest tightened. She had made it farther than he thought. But whether she was still alive, he couldn't know. As he rode, his mind wandered to his childhood, to the first time he had been taught what it meant to be Apache. The elders had told him that a warrior's heart must be like stone, unmoved by weakness or sorrow. Yet his mother had told him something different. A heart of stone cannot feel the earth, she'd said, and a man who cannot feel will one day lose himself. Now her words echoed with every step of his horse. The desert stretched endlessly before him, beautiful and cruel. He saw vultures circling in the distance and felt a twist of fear. He pushed his horse faster. When he finally reached the canyon, he dismounted and climbed down into the shadows. The air was cooler there, filled with the sound of trickling water. And then faintly he heard it. Cough. A rustle of movement. He followed the sound, heart pounding. She was there, slumped against the rocks, her face pale, her lips cracked from thirst. When she saw him, her eyes widened with shock and fear. "You followed me?" she whispered. "I had to make sure you were alive." She tried to stand but swayed, too weak. He knelt beside her, offering his water pouch. She hesitated before taking it, drinking slowly. When she lowered it, tears glistened in her eyes. "They'll kill you if they find out," she said softly. He didn't answer. Instead, he looked around, checking the horizon. "You can't stay here. The sun will destroy you before another day passes." "Where can I go?" she asked, voice trembling. "I don't even know which way leads to safety." He studied her for a moment, then pointed west. "There's a settlement 3 days from here. If you follow the mountains, you might reach it." She nodded weakly, then looked at him again. "You could come with me." The words caught him off guard. For a brief second, he imagined it, a life far from the tribe, away from the code that bound him. A life of quiet freedom where he didn't have to fight or obey or hide. But that thought faded as quickly as it came. His place was among his people, even if they no longer accepted him. "I can't," he said finally. She looked down. Silent as the day faded, he helped her gather strength, shared what little food he had, and built a small fire inside the canyon walls. The light flickered between them, warm against the chill of evening. For the first time, they spoke without fear. She told him about her home, her family, the life she had before she was captured. Her words painted pictures he had never imagined: green fields, quiet rivers, the sound of bells in the distance. When she asked about him, he spoke little. Only that he had spent his life serving a law that demanded loyalty above compassion. She didn't judge him, and that silence felt like forgiveness. But as the stars came out, the sound of horses echoed faintly across the canyon. Both of them froze. He rose to his feet, eyes narrowing. "They're coming," he said. Her face went pale. "What will you do?" He looked toward the ridge, then back at her. "Whatever I must." The wind picked up, carrying the sound of hooves closer. He could see torchlight flickering in the distance, his people, hunting. The firelight around them dimmed as he stepped forward, every instinct warring inside him. The choice he made next would decide not only his fate, but hers, and the line between honor and mercy would never look the same again. The sound of hooves grew louder, echoing off the canyon walls like rolling thunder. The Apache warrior's pulse quickened as he looked toward the ridge. The torches glowed brighter against the darkening sky, flickering like angry stars. They were close now, too close. He turned back to the girl, who was struggling to stand, fear written across her face. "You must hide," he whispered urgently. She shook her head, her voice trembling. "They'll find me. They always do." "It's not if I lead them away," he said firmly. She stared at him, realization dawning. "You'll be killed." He didn't respond. Instead, he grabbed his bow from the ground and slung it across his shoulder. "Stay low," he said. "Don't make a sound until the sun rises. If you hear anything, don't move." Her eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. He gave her one last look before stepping out into the open desert. The night air was sharp and dry. The sand cooled beneath his feet. His horse waited where he had left it, snorting softly. He mounted quickly, scanning the horizon. The riders were approaching from the east, his people. The ones he had fought beside, bled beside. Now, they were the ones hunting him. He spurred the horse forward, moving fast across the flat ground. His heart pounded in rhythm with the animal's hooves, every beat echoing his decision. Behind him, the torches shifted direction. They had seen him. The chase began. For miles, the desert blurred into motion, the wind in his hair, the grit stinging his eyes, the thundering of pursuit. He led them away from the canyon, deeper into the wastelands, where the dunes rose high and the moonlight played tricks on the eyes. He knew this land better than any of them. He knew where it curved and dipped, where shadows could hide tracks, where silence could be used as cover. When he reached the edge of the cliffs, he slowed. The drop below was steep, the rocks jagged. He turned his horse sharply and disappeared into a narrow ravine, vanishing from sight. Behind him, the rider's shouts grew distant. He guided his horse down the rocky slope, careful not to make noise. Only when the sounds faded completely did he stop. He stayed still for a long moment, listening to the wind. The desert seemed calm again, as if the chase had been only a passing storm. But he knew they wouldn't give up easily. The Apache never stopped hunting what they considered dishonor. He was no longer one of them. He was the betrayer. He waited until the stars began to fade before turning back toward the canyon. The ride was slower this time, every sense alert for movement. When he reached the place where he had left her, dawn was just breaking. Painting the sky in soft orange, she was still there, crouched near the rocks, her face pale but alive. When she saw him, her expression shifted from fear to disbelief. "You came back," she whispered. "I said I would," he replied quietly. She rose unsteadily, glancing past him toward the horizon. "Did they follow you?" "For now, no," he said. "But they will return." She looked down, her voice barely a whisper. "Then it's my fault you're in danger," he shook his head. "It was my choice." They moved farther into the canyon, where the walls were high and the light dim. He found a small cave hidden behind a cluster of stones and led her inside. It wasn't much, but it offered shade and safety for a while. The day passed slowly. Outside, the desert shimmered under the heat, but inside the cave it was cool and silent. She rested, her strength returning little by little. He stayed near the entrance, watching the horizon. Every movement of the wind made his hand tighten around his bow as hours went by. A strange quiet settled between them, not uncomfortable but heavy with things unsaid. Finally, she spoke. "Why do you stay? You could still return to your people." He looked at her, his voice steady. "There is no returning after what I did." She lowered her eyes. "Then what will you do?" "I don't know," he admitted, "but I can't let them find you. They won't stop until they've punished someone."
Alice followed.
Outside, a hawk cried, circling high above the canyon. Later that night, when the stars came out again, she sat near the fire they built from dry twigs. Her face glowed softly in the light, her eyes reflecting both fear and gratitude. "Back home," she said quietly, "we were told your people were merciless, that they took what they wanted, that they had no pity." He looked into the flames. "And what do you believe now?" She hesitated. "I think maybe we were wrong." He didn't answer, but her words stayed with him. Mercy was not a word often spoken among his people. Mercy was weakness. Yet in this small, fragile moment, it felt like the only thing keeping them alive. As the night deepened, he told her stories of the desert, how it could both protect and destroy, how the stars were believed to be the eyes of their ancestors. She listened in silence, her gaze fixed on him, trying to understand the man who had risked everything for her. But even as they spoke, far away in the Apache camp, The search continued. His brother stood before the chief, torn between truth and loyalty. The others demanded answers. "He helped her escape," one said. "We found his horse tracks near the canyon." The chief's eyes narrowed. "Then he has betrayed us." His brother said nothing, but guilt weighed heavily on him. He had seen his brother's eyes that night, had heard the quiet conviction in his voice. He knew why he had done it. Yet he also knew what would happen now. The warriors would not stop until they found him. By morning, the riders set out again. The brother went with them, though his heart was heavy. Back in the canyon, the warrior woke to the faint rumble of thunder. The air smelled of rain, a rare gift in the desert, but also a curse for those hiding. Rain would wash away scent and track alike, but it would also make the ground soft and difficult to cross. He stood at the cave's mouth, watching the sky darken. "We'll have to move," he said. "They'll search this area soon." She rose, pulling her torn shawl around her shoulders. "Where will we go?" "There's a forest near the mountains," he replied. "If we can reach it before night, they'll lose our trail." The journey was hard. The rain came fast, turning the ground to mud. The wind howled through the rocks, and lightning flashed across the sky. They moved as quickly as they could, stopping only when exhaustion forced them to. Several times he thought he saw shapes moving in the distance, dark figures on horseback, but the storm blurred everything into shadows by dusk. The trees stood tall and black against the fading light, their branches swaying in the wind. He led her under the thick canopy where the ground was dry and the air still. Only then did he allow himself to breathe. She sank to the ground, trembling with fatigue. "I didn't think we'd make it," she said softly. He crouched beside her, eyes scanning the forest edge. "You'll be safe here. For now." She looked at him, confusion in her eyes. "And you?" "I'll stay until I'm sure they're gone." They both fell silent. The rain had stopped, but the sound of dripping leaves filled the air. The forest was different from the desert, quieter, but somehow more alive. Every rustle of movement felt like a whisper, every shadow like a secret. That night, as they rested beneath the trees, she finally asked what had been pressing on her mind. "Why did you really help me?" He didn't answer right away. The question hung between them like smoke. Finally, he said, "Because once, someone showed me kindness when I didn't deserve it." "I never forgot. Who was it?" she asked. "My mother," he said simply. She believed even an enemy could be forgiven. She nodded, understanding softening her features. Then she was wise. He looked up at the stars through the branches. She died because others didn't believe as she did. The silence that followed was heavy, filled with memories neither of them could touch, far away. His brother and the search party reached the canyon and found the traces of fire and footprints leading north. The chief's anger burned brighter than the torches they carried. "He has chosen his path," he said. "And if we find him, he will answer to the spirits." The brother stayed quiet, but his thoughts were torn. Blood demanded loyalty. Yet the memory of his brother's courage, the quiet mercy he had shown, refused to leave him. By the time dawn came again, the hunt had turned into something deeper, not just a search for a captive, but for the truth behind what kind of man his brother had become. And somewhere in the forest, the warrior sat awake, listening to the faint crack of branches in the distance. Knowing that his past was drawing closer with every passing hour, the forest was thick with mist the next morning. The air hung heavy, filled with the smell of damp earth and pine. The Apache warrior sat motionless beneath a large tree, every muscle tense. His bow rested across his lap, an arrow already notched. The faint chirping of birds masked the sound of his steady breathing. He had learned to listen beyond what the ear could catch, the silence between sounds, the sudden stop of the wind. Those were signs of danger. The girl still slept near the base of the tree, wrapped in the small blanket he had given her. Her face looked peaceful for the first time since he had met her, though there was still a trace of fear in her expression. As if even her dreams couldn't forget what she had been through. He watched her quietly, feeling the strange mix of protectiveness and guilt twisting inside him. Every minute she stayed with him, the risk grew. And yet he couldn't leave her. Not until he knew she was safe. When she stirred awake, she blinked at the filtered light coming through the branches. "Are we still being followed?" she asked softly. "Always assume we are," he replied, scanning the tree line. "They won't give up easily." She sat up, brushing dirt from her clothes. "Your people. Do they hate you now?" He didn't answer right away. "They believe I betrayed them," he said finally. "In their eyes, I broke what can't be fixed. Because of me." She whispered. He met her gaze. "No, because of what I chose to believe." She looked away, her voice quiet. "I don't think I can ever repay you." "I didn't do it for payment," he said. "I did it because you asked me to." The forest remained calm for most of the morning. They moved carefully through the trees, following a narrow stream that wound between the rocks. He had decided they would travel west until they found the settlement he had mentioned. It would be safer there. But deep down, he knew the path wouldn't stay clear for long. Around midday, the wind shifted. He stopped suddenly, raising a hand for her to stay still. She froze, her eyes wide. He crouched low, pressing his ear to the ground. It was faint, but he could feel it, the rhythmic vibration of hooves. "They've found us," he said under his breath. Panic flashed in her eyes. "What do we do?" He looked around, scanning the terrain. The forest grew denser ahead, the undergrowth thick with brush. "We move fast and stay low," he said. "Don't speak, don't stop." They ran. Branches whipped against their faces, leaves crunching beneath their feet. The sound of pursuit grew louder, shouts in the Apache tongue, voices he recognized. His brother's voice was among them. That cut deeper than the fear. They reached a ravine, splitting the forest in two. It wasn't wide, but the drop was steep. He paused only a moment before jumping down, helping her follow. They slid against the dirt, landing hard at the bottom. She gasped, but he pulled her to her feet. "Keep moving," he said. As they crossed the ravine, the cries of the warriors echoed above them. Arrows sliced through the air, striking trees and stones. One whistled past her shoulder. She stumbled, but he caught her, pushing her forward. When they finally reached the opposite side, he turned and shot an arrow toward the ridge, forcing the pursuers to take cover. "Go," he shouted, his voice low but urgent. They ran until the forest thinned into open plains. Ahead, the land stretched wide, a sea of tall grass bending in the wind. Beyond it, the faint outline of mountains shimmered in the distance. "If we can reach the ridge by sunset, they'll lose our scent," he said. Her breath came in gasps. "Can we make it?" He looked back at the line of trees. "We have to." They crossed the plains, the sun beating down on their backs. Every step was a struggle, exhaustion clawing at their bodies, fear pressing at their minds. The warrior knew his people's tactics. They would not attack recklessly. They would watch, surround, and strike when escape seemed closest. By late afternoon, they reached a cluster of rocks near the base of the mountains. It offered little shelter, but enough to hide for a short time. He led her inside a narrow crevice between two boulders. "Rest here," he said. "I'll scout ahead." She grabbed his arm, her voice shaking. "Don't go too far." He gave a small nod before stepping out into the light. The air was still unnervingly quiet. He moved like a shadow, scanning the horizon. That's when he saw it, a trail of smoke rising from the tree line they had left behind. His people were burning through the forest to drive them into the open. His heart tightened. He returned to the crevice quickly. "We can't stay long," he said. "They're pushing us toward the mountains." She looked at the smoke in the distance, her voice breaking. "Why are they doing this?" "To erase shame," he said grimly. "They'll destroy everything if it means restoring honor." As the day began to fade, they climbed higher into the mountains. The path grew steep, the air thinner. The warrior's senses stayed sharp, but fatigue pressed hard on him now. The weight of his decisions, the years of loyalty, and the betrayal that followed, all of it bore down on him like a stone. When night finally fell, they reached a plateau overlooking the valley below. From there, they could see the glow of the fires in the distance. The girl sat beside him, trembling from cold and exhaustion. "We can't keep running forever," she whispered. He didn't look at her. His eyes stayed fixed on the horizon. "Sometimes running is the only choice left." Maybe for me, she said softly. But not for you. He turned to her, his expression unreadable. You don't understand. If they find me, it's not only my life they'll take. It's everything my name stood for. And what does your name stand for now? She asked gently. He hesitated. For the first time, he didn't know the answer. Below them, the forest flickered with torchlight. The riders were drawing closer again. The chase that had seemed endless was tightening around them. The warrior knew there was no escape without confrontation. He checked his bow, counting his remaining arrows. Only 4 left. He tightened the strap around his chest and looked at her. If they find us, you must run to the ridge and keep going west. Don't stop. She shook her head. I won't leave you. You have to. Tears filled her eyes. You saved me. I can't just leave you to die. He reached out and touched her shoulder, his voice calm but firm. You don't owe me your life. You just have to live it. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. She nodded slowly, unable to speak. They waited in silence as the torches grew brighter below. The sound of hooves and voices drifted upward through the night air. The warrior's heart beat hard against his chest. He knew the faces that approached his brothers, his friends, his people, and leading them was the man he had grown up beside, the one who once shared his fire and his secrets. When the first riders appeared at the edge of the plateau, he stepped out from behind the rocks. The girl gasped, but he motioned for her to stay hidden. He stood tall in the open, bow lowered, but ready. The riders halted, the torches flickering against the dark stone. His brother was at the front, his expression torn between anger and sorrow. You should not have come back, his brother said quietly. I never left, the warrior replied. My heart still belongs here. Your heart chose a stranger over your people, his brother said, voice hardening. You broke the law. I saved a life, he answered. If that is breaking the law, then maybe it should be broken. Murmurs rippled through the group. Some of the warriors shifted uncomfortably. Others tightened their grips on their weapons. His brother dismounted, stepping closer. You know what must happen? The chief will demand your blood. The warrior nodded slowly. Then take it. The silence that followed was thick and unbearable. The torches hissed in the wind, and for a brief moment, time seemed to stop. His brother's jaw tightened. You always did walk your own path, he said quietly. But this time, there's no return. Behind him, the girl stirred. The movement caught one of the warrior's eyes. There, he shouted, the moment shattered. Shouts filled the air as they raised their weapons. The warrior turned sharply, placing himself between them and her. Arrows flew, striking stone. She cried out, ducking behind the rocks. He loosed his own arrow, hitting the nearest rider. Chaos erupted. The plateau became a storm of sound and motion, firelight, dust, the sharp clash of metal. He fought with precision, every move fueled by instinct, not rage. But they were too many. His brother shouted for them to hold, but the noise drowned his voice. The girl ran toward the ridge as he had told her, but one of the riders broke away to follow. The warrior saw her stumble, saw the glint of a blade behind her. He turned. Dot! Rage burning through his exhaustion, and charged. The fight tore through the darkness, the clash of loyalty and defiance, blood and belief. The warrior's movements grew slower, his strength fading, but his spirit refused to break. The sound of the girl's cry reached him through the chaos. He turned toward it, his vision blurring, his breath sharp in his chest. The torches flickered wildly, throwing long shadows across the rocks. And in that storm of firelight and noise, everything he had fought for, mercy, loyalty, freedom, collided in one final moment that would decide everything. The sound of the wind was the first, a thing she heard after the chaos faded. It swept across the mountain ridge, carrying with it the scent of smoke and dust. The girl opened her eyes slowly, her body trembling from exhaustion and fear. The torches that once lit the plateau were now scattered and dim, their flames flickering weakly against the stones. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Then it came rushing back, the fight, the shouting, the warrior standing between her and the riders. Her heart ached as she pushed herself up, her hands scraped and bleeding. The ridge below was quiet now. The riders were gone, or at least she couldn't see them. The only sound was the faint crackle of burning wood from a fallen torch. She looked around desperately, calling out his name. There was no answer. Her voice broke as she tried again, louder this time, the words echoing into the emptiness. Still nothing. She stumbled forward, her legs weak. Then she saw him lying near the edge of the plateau, half covered in dust and blood. Her breath caught as she ran to him, falling to her knees beside his still body. His chest rose faintly. He was alive, but barely. She pressed her hands against his shoulder where an arrow had pierced through. His eyes fluttered open, heavy with pain. "You made it," he whispered. "You told me to run," she said, tears slipping down her cheeks. "But I couldn't leave you." He tried to smile, though his lips barely moved. "Stubborn," he murmured. "You saved me again," she said softly, her voice breaking. "Why would you do that when it cost you everything?" He looked up at the night sky, where stars began to appear faintly through the smoke. "Because life means something when it's given for someone who still believes," he said. "My people forgot that." She took his hand, holding it tightly. "You're not alone," she said. "You're not forgotten." He closed his eyes for a moment, breathing slowly. The sounds of distant horses faded completely now. It seemed the riders had withdrawn, perhaps taking their wounded with them, or maybe realizing that vengeance had lost its meaning. Either way, silence settled over the mountains like a blanket. The girl stayed beside him until dawn, refusing to move. She tore pieces of her dress to bind his wound and did what she could to keep him warm. When the first light broke across the horizon, she saw how pale he'd become, yet his eyes opened again when the sun touched his face. "Daylight," he whispered. "We live to see it." She nodded, trying to smile, though her tears still fell. "We'll get help," she said. "There's a settlement west of here." "You said so yourself." He nodded faintly, his voice weak. "You'll find it. Follow the valley until the river bends. They'll take you in." "You're coming with me," she said firmly. He looked at her, his expression soft. "If I don't, promise me something," he said. She shook her head. "Don't say that. Promise me," he repeated. "That you'll keep walking. That you'll live." She pressed her forehead against his hand, nodding through her sobs. "I promise." The wind stirred again, lifting the strands of her hair. When she looked up, his breathing had slowed, his eyes half closed. For a long moment, he seemed to be listening to something far away, a sound only he could hear. Then, with a faint sigh, his body relaxed completely. She sat there for a long time, her tears falling silently onto his hand. The sun climbed higher, warming the stones around them. The mountain felt both alive and empty at once. She knew she couldn't stay. He had fought too hard for her to stop now. She built a small cairn over the place where he lay, using flat stones she gathered from the ridge. It wasn't much, but she arranged them carefully, marking it with the feather from his bow. When she stood back, she whispered a quiet prayer, not one she had learned, but one she made herself. A promise, a thank you, and a goodbye, all in one breath. Then she turned west and began to walk. The journey down the mountains was slow and painful. Her feet were blistered, and every muscle ached. But with every step she remembered his words, "Keep walking." She followed the valley as he had told her, tracing the river that wound through the plains. Days passed, though she lost track of how many. The nights were cold, and the wind often made her think she heard his voice calling from far away. Yet she kept going, holding on to that faint thread of hope. One morning, as the fog lifted, she saw smoke rising in the distance again, not from fire this time, but from chimneys. A small settlement sat nestled between the hills, its wooden roofs catching the morning light. Relief surged through her chest. She hurried toward it, though her legs nearly gave out with every step. The people there took her in without question. They gave her food, water, and a place to rest. When they asked where she had come from, she told them only that someone had saved her life in the mountains. They didn't ask for more. Weeks passed before she regained her strength. But even as her body healed, her heart carried the weight of what she had seen and lost. Sometimes she would sit outside at night, staring toward the distant peaks where his body rested. The wind that blew from that direction always felt different, colder, but also calm, like it carried his spirit with it, in time. She began to write down her story, not for fame or glory, but because she didn't want his memory to fade. She wrote about the warrior who chose mercy over blood, who defied his tribe's code to protect a stranger. She wrote about his courage, his silence, and the quiet strength that had changed her life. People in the settlement listened when she read it aloud by the fire. Some said it was just a tale. Others believed it was real. But she knew the truth, that there had been a man whose name she never even learned, who gave her the chance to live. Years later, travelers who passed through the same mountains spoke of a place near the ridge where the wind never stopped. They said it sounded like someone whispering in the stones, a soft murmur that carried through the valley. Some believed it was the voice of an Apache warrior guarding the path, ensuring no harm came to those who crossed it. Others said it was only the wind. But those who lingered there long enough swore they could feel peace settle over them. For her, life moved on. She built a small home by the river, helped others as she had once been helped, and found comfort in simple things. Yet she never forgot. Every spring when the snow melted from the mountains, she would walk to the highest hill and look toward the west, whispering the same words she had spoken that morning, "You're not forgotten." Time softened her pain, but never erased it. The story of the Apache warrior became something of a legend among the settlers, a tale passed from one generation to another. But to her, it wasn't just a legend. It was a reminder that compassion could exist even in the harshest of worlds. That one act of kindness could change the course of many lives. In the end, she found peace not in forgetting the past, but in carrying it with her as part of her journey, part of her strength. And when her own time came, she asked to be buried facing the mountains, so that in death she could still look toward the place where courage and kindness had met. The wind that passed through those peaks carried many stories, but hers and his became one, a quiet echo of love, sacrifice, and redemption that outlived them both. The land remembered even when people forgot, and somewhere beyond the ridge, where the sun met the stone, the spirit of the Apache warrior kept watch, not for vengeance or pride, but for peace. The very thing he had fought so hard to give. The mountains stood silent as they always had, the sky wide and endless above them. Yet in the calm of that vastness, a story lived on, one of a man who chose mercy, a woman who chose hope, and the bond between them that neither time nor death could break. It was the kind of story that whispered to anyone who listened closely enough, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, there is still light waiting to be found, top of form, bottom of form,